The date was September 11, 2001. It began like any other late summer day, a Tuesday. Across the United States, alarm clocks rang. People woke up, coffee brewed. The sun rose over the East Coast, promising warmth. Skies were a brilliant, clear blue. A perfect day for flying, some might have thought. Millions prepared for their routines. School buses rumbled through neighborhoods. Commuters filled trains and highways heading towards their destinations, their futures seemingly mapped out. Little did anyone know the profound shift awaiting them. Life moved at its familiar pace. In New York City, the financial heart of the world was already awake. Workers streamed into the iconic Twin Towers. They greeted colleagues. They settled at their desks. They looked out at the sprawling city below. In Washington, D.C., the nation's capital buzzed with early activity. At the Pentagon, military and civilian personnel began their duties. Elsewhere, families shared breakfast, last-minute travel plans were confirmed, ordinary moments unfolded, unaware they were on the precipice of history. These were the final hours of a shared innocence. Across the country, the news channels reported on mundane events. The weather forecast, sports scores from the night before, political updates that seemed important at the time. There was no warning, no premonition of the terror about to be unleashed. The threads of countless lives were weaving together, each person engaged in the simple act of living, each life, a story, each story unknowingly approaching a terrifying intersection. The world was holding its breath, though it did not realize it. The ordinary was about to become extraordinary in the most tragic way. The hands of the clock ticked forward. Minutes passed, each one seemingly like the last. Yet unseen forces were already in motion. Decisions made in distant lands were converging on this unsuspecting nation. The illusion of security was strong. The belief in a predictable world, deeply ingrained. This day would shatter that illusion. It would carve a deep line in time. There would be a before, and there would be an after. The weight of what was to come hung invisibly in the crisp September air, a silent gathering storm. Then, the unthinkable happened. The clear blue sky became a canvas of disbelief. Reports started to filter through, confusing at first, then horrifyingly clear. America was under attack. Not by a distant army on a foreign battlefield, but here, at home, in its most vibrant city, at the very symbols of its strength and identity, the Twin Towers in New York City, the Pentagon near Washington, D.C., and a quiet field in Pennsylvania. These places would forever be etched into the global memory. This documentary will guide you through that fateful day. We will explore the events minute by minute. We will seek to understand how such a tragedy could occur. We will look at the masterminds, their planning, their motives. We will examine the execution of their devastating plot, the hijackings, the final, desperate moments aboard those flights, the courage of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. We will hear their voices, we will remember their stories. This is a journey into a day that shook the world to its core. The attacks of September 11th were not just an assault on buildings, they were an assault on an idea, an assault on a way of life. Thousands of innocent lives were lost, from all walks of life, from many nations, each a unique individual, a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend. Their absence created voids that can never be truly filled. Yet amidst the chaos and despair, stories of incredible heroism emerged. First responders rushed towards danger, strangers helped strangers. A nation, and indeed the world, watched in shock, grief, and then a search for answers. We will delve into the immediate aftermath, the desperate rescue efforts, the global outpouring of sympathy, and the profound, lasting changes that followed. Security measures transformed, international relations shifted. The world embarked on a new, uncertain era. This story is not just about destruction. It is about resilience. It is about remembrance. It is about understanding the forces that led to 9/11, and how that single day continues to shape the world we live in today. In the shadows, a network was forming. It was called Al-Qaeda, meaning the base. Its leader was Osama bin Laden, born into wealth in Saudi Arabia. He became a figure of radical ideology. His early experiences in Afghanistan, resisting the Soviet invasion, shaped his path. He believed the world needed to change. He saw Western influence as a corrupting force. This belief hardened into a dangerous conviction, a conviction that would eventually lead to global terror. Al-Qaeda developed a profound animosity towards the United States and its allies in the Western world. They cited various grievances: The presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, near Islam's holiest sites, support for Israel in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, sanctions against Iraq. These were seen as acts of aggression, or deep injustices against the Muslim world. This narrative of victimhood and oppression fueled their recruitment. It justified their calls for violent retribution. A dangerous ideology was taking root. The organization grew steadily, though largely unseen by many. It established training camps in remote areas, primarily in Afghanistan, under the protection of the Taliban regime. Fighters were drawn from various countries, united by a shared, extreme interpretation of their faith, and a commitment to bin Laden's vision. They learned combat skills. They were indoctrinated in extremist ideology. They prepared for a long global struggle, a struggle they believed was divinely ordained. The network was slowly, methodically building its capacity for terror. Then came the formal declarations. Bin Laden issued fatwas, or religious edicts. These called for attacks against Americans, both military and civilian, anywhere in the world. This was a significant escalation. It marked a shift from regional conflicts to a direct declared war on a superpower. The threats were initially underestimated by some, or not fully understood in their scope. But the intent was clear. Al-Qaeda was now openly dedicated to striking the United States. The seeds of 9/11 were being sown. The specific idea for the September 11th attacks began to crystallize. The chief architect was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, known as KSM, a Kuwaiti-born militant with deep ties to Al-Qaeda. He was driven by a fervent anti-American sentiment. KSM had long harbored ambitions for spectacular attacks. He envisioned using airplanes as weapons. A terrifying, audacious concept. He first proposed elements of this destructive vision to Al-Qaeda's leadership in the mid-1990s. It was a plan of unprecedented scale. KSM's initial proposals were even more extensive, targeting numerous sites simultaneously across the United States, and potentially in other countries as well. He thought of attacking nuclear power plants, but these were deemed too complex or too risky by Al-Qaeda's senior figures. The plan was gradually refined, scaled back to something considered more achievable, yet still devastatingly ambitious. The focus sharpened. The targets became more symbolic. The plane's operation, as it was internally known, began to take shape. It was a carefully guarded secret. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed officially presented his refined plan to Osama bin Laden. This happened in Afghanistan, likely in early 1999. Bin Laden was intrigued. He saw the potential for a massive blow against the United States. He approved the concept. He pledged Al-Qaeda's full support. Resources were allocated. Manpower was designated. The operational security was paramount. Only a very small circle within Al-Qaeda knew the full extent of the plot. The planners understood the immense impact such an attack would have. They craved that impact. The chosen targets were deeply symbolic. The World Trade Center in New York City represented American economic power, the global reach of its capitalism. The Pentagon, near Washington, D.C., was the heart of American military might. The third target, which ultimately crashed in Pennsylvania, was believed to be aimed at a political symbol, perhaps the U.S. Capitol building or the White House. The goal was to cripple America, to humiliate it on the world stage, to demonstrate its vulnerability. The planners believed this would inspire others, and shift global power dynamics. Section 3. The Operatives Forging the Instruments of Attack. The selection of the individuals to carry out the attacks was meticulous. Al-Qaeda sought operatives with unwavering loyalty, absolute commitment to the cause, and a profound willingness to die. 19 men were ultimately chosen. Most were from Saudi Arabia. Others came from the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Lebanon. They were a mix of educated individuals and those with less formal schooling, but all shared a deep radicalization. They believed they were embarking on a sacred mission, a mission that promised them paradise. The chosen men were divided into groups. Some were designated as muscle hijackers. Their role was to control the crew and passengers, to create fear and maintain order on the planes. They received basic physical training in Al-Qaeda camps. They learned some hand-to-hand combat. They were taught how to use simple weapons like box cutters. These would be smuggled aboard the aircraft. Their training focused on intimidation and ensuring the pilots could reach the cockpits. They prepared for a one-way journey. Their resolve was constantly reinforced. A smaller, more crucial group consisted of the pilot hijackers. These men needed specialized skills. They had to learn how to fly commercial jetliners, at least well enough to guide them to their targets. Several candidates were sent to the West. They enrolled in flight schools in the United States and Europe. Mohammed Atta, who would lead the 9/11 operation, trained in Florida, as did Marwan al-Shehi. Ziad Jarrah trained there too. It was a chilling irony. They used American freedoms and institutions to prepare for an attack on America itself. In the final months and weeks, preparations intensified. The operatives moved into their final positions. They communicated using coded messages. They conducted surveillance of their target flights. Logistical support networks, however small, helped them in the United States, providing accommodation and assistance. The final directives were issued by Al-Qaeda leadership. The date was set. The operatives awaited their signal. There was a chilling sense of anticipation among the planners. The complex, deadly machine they had built was ready to be set in motion. The world remained blissfully unaware. Section 2. Terror takes flight. The sky becomes a weapon. The signal was given. On American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles, the attack began. Approximately 15 minutes after takeoff, the hijackers sprang into action. They brandished their weapons, box cutters, perhaps mace or pepper spray. Panic and confusion erupted in the cabin. Flight attendants were among the first to be confronted. They bravely tried to understand, to protect their passengers, to alert the pilots. But the attackers were swift and ruthless. They were determined to seize control. The hijackers forced their way into the cockpit. A violent struggle likely ensued. The serene environment of the flight deck became a scene of terror. The pilots, Captain John Oganowski and First Officer Thomas McGinnis, fought to maintain control, but they were overcome. Distress calls were made, fragmented, chilling. Air traffic controllers heard unfamiliar voices, threats, the sounds of a struggle. Then a hijacker believed to be Mohammed Atta mistakenly broadcast a message intended for the passengers. He spoke to air traffic control instead, confirming the hijacking. Aboard the other flights, similar scenarios unfolded. On United 175, also out of Boston, on American 77 from Dulles, on United 93, after a delay from Newark, the hijackers rose. They subdued crew and passengers. They breached the cockpits. The transponders, devices that identify aircraft to radar, were turned off, or changed. Flights began to deviate from their designated paths. Air traffic controllers watched in disbelief. Their screens showed planes veering wildly, disappearing, then reappearing, heading towards unknown destinations. A horrifying pattern was emerging. The realization dawned quickly: this was not a single, isolated incident. Multiple commercial airliners were compromised simultaneously. The scale of the coordination was terrifying. The skies, once a symbol of freedom and connection, were being transformed. They were becoming conduits for an attack. The hijackers were now in command of powerful flying machines. They were aiming them not at runways, but at symbols of American power. The nation was vulnerable, exposed in a way it had never been before. The unthinkable was happening. Section 3. Assault on an icon, the Twin Towers attacked. American Airlines Flight 11 was now under the control of Mohammed Atta and his team. It turned south towards New York City. On board, flight attendants Betty Ong and Amy Sweeney made courageous calls. They relayed vital information to ground personnel, describing the hijackers, their seat numbers, the violence in the cabin, and the fact that the cockpit was inaccessible. These calls provided the first harrowing details of what was happening. They painted a picture of chaos and bravery in the face of death. Their voices, calm yet urgent, became crucial early testimony. At 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time, the unimaginable occurred. American Airlines Flight 11, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It struck between the 93rd and 99th floors. A massive fireball erupted, and a plume of black smoke billowed into the pristine blue sky. On the ground, people looked up in shock and confusion. Was it an accident? A small plane? News cameras, initially focused on other stories, quickly turned towards the burning tower. The world began to watch, unaware that this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, United Airlines Flight 175 was also heading towards New York City. Hijacked shortly after Flight 11, passengers on this flight, through desperate calls to loved ones, learned of the attack on the North Tower. They understood their own terrible fate, the dawning realization that their plane was also a weapon, that they were part of a larger, horrifying plot. The minutes that followed must have been filled with unimaginable dread and perhaps, for some, a desperate resolve, knowing what awaited them. 17 minutes after the first impact, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. It hit between the 77th and 85th floors. This second impact, witnessed live by millions on television, dispelled any notion of an accident. It was a deliberate, coordinated assault. The sight of the second plane arcing through the sky, disappearing into the skyscraper, followed by another massive explosion, seared itself into the collective consciousness. America was under attack, and the world watched in horror. Section 4. A nation under siege. Pentagon hit. Heroes emerge. As smoke poured from the Twin Towers, another drama was unfolding. American Airlines Flight 77, which had departed from Washington Dulles Airport, was also hijacked. It flew undetected for a period, its transponder off. It then turned back towards Washington, D.C. Air traffic controllers struggled to locate it. The target was the Pentagon, the very heart of the nation's military command. The hijackers navigated the Boeing 757 towards Arlington, Virginia. The intent was clear: to strike at the core of American defense. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the western side of the Pentagon. The impact and subsequent fire caused a partial collapse of the structure. 125 people in the building were killed, along with the 64 people aboard the aircraft. Emergency crews rushed to the scene. Smoke billowed from the iconic five-sided building. The attack on the Pentagon signaled that this was not just an assault on New York. It was an attack on the Capitol, on the symbols of American governance and security. The nation felt profoundly vulnerable. The fourth hijacked plane was United Airlines Flight 93. It departed late from Newark, New Jersey. This delay proved crucial. Because of it, passengers on board learned about the attacks in New York and Washington. Through calls made on airphones and cell phones, they pieced together the terrifying truth. Their plane was also a weapon, aimed at another target in the Capitol, possibly the U.S. Capitol building or the White House. Faced with this certain death, they made a courageous decision. They decided to fight back. The passengers and crew of United 93 stormed the cockpit. A desperate struggle ensued. Audio recordings from the cockpit voice recorder captured the sounds of the fight, the shouts, the chaos. The terrorists struggled to maintain control of the aircraft. As the passengers fought, the plane flew erratically. Then, at 10:03 a.m., it crashed into an empty field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. All 44 people on board perished, but their heroic actions likely prevented an even greater catastrophe. They became symbols of resistance, ordinary people who chose to act in the face of unimaginable terror. Section 1. The World Watches, Between Impact and Inferno. The second impact on the World Trade Center erased all doubt. This was no accident. This was a deliberate act of aggression. Live television cameras, already fixed on the burning North Tower, captured the horrifying scene. United Airlines Flight 175 sliced into the South Tower. A bright orange fireball erupted. Debris rained down onto the streets below. Across the nation and around the globe, people watched in stunned silence. Workplaces fell quiet. Classrooms paused. The ordinary rhythm of the day shattered, replaced by a collective gasp of disbelief and horror. The world was witnessing an attack unfold in real time. In New York City, the initial shockwave of the first crash was amplified. The second plane confirmed the city was under siege. The sounds were deafening, the explosions, the sirens growing in number, wailing through the concrete canyons. From the streets, onlookers gazed upwards, their faces etched with fear and incomprehension. Many began to flee the area, a tide of humanity moving away from the burning landmarks. Others, driven by a need to help or to document, moved closer. The air filled with smoke and with the acrid smell of jet fuel. The clear blue sky was now scarred, permanently. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, faced an unprecedented crisis. With 2 planes confirmed crashed into the World Trade Center and others unresponsive, a terrifying possibility emerged that more hijacked aircraft could be airborne. At 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time, a critical decision was made. For the first time in American history, all civilian air traffic across the entire United States was ordered to land. Thousands of planes carrying hundreds of thousands of passengers were instructed to divert, to find the nearest airport. The nation's airspace was shut down completely. A silent, empty sky was the goal. News of the attacks reached President George W. Bush. He was in Sarasota, Florida, visiting an elementary school. Chief of Staff Andrew Card whispered the news into his ear. A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. The president's expression, caught on camera, revealed the gravity of the moment. The initial reports from New York had been confusing. Now, the picture was terrifyingly clear. The United States was facing a coordinated assault. The leader of the free world absorbed the information, the weight of decisions yet to come settling upon him. The day was still young. Section 2, Trapped Above, Heroes Below, The Desperate Struggle. Inside the Twin Towers, above the impact zones, conditions were becoming unbearable. Thousands of people were trapped. The initial explosions had destroyed stairwells or rendered them impassable with fire and debris. Smoke, thick and choking, filled the upper floors. Heat from the raging fires intensified with each passing minute. Escape routes were cut off. Those caught on the highest floors faced an unimaginable predicament. They were surrounded by flames with no way down. The city stretched out below them, so close, yet impossibly far. Their choices were dwindling. Desperate phone calls poured out from the towers. People called 911. They called their families, their colleagues, their friends. They spoke of the smoke, of the heat, of being trapped. Some calls were requests for rescue. Others were heartbreaking goodbyes. Husbands told wives they loved them. Parents spoke to their children for the last time. These final conversations, filled with anguish and love, offered a human testament to the terror. They revealed courage and profound sorrow. Each call a story of a life about to be extinguished, each one a painful echo of the larger tragedy. While many were trapped, an exodus was underway below the impact zones. Tens of thousands of people began the long descent down darkened, smoke-filled stairwells, helping each other, guiding each other. The injured were carried, the frightened were calmed. Amidst the chaos, acts of compassion and solidarity shone through. Office workers became impromptu rescuers. Strangers became lifelines. The sheer scale of the evacuation was immense. A vertical city emptying itself under the most extreme duress. Each step downwards was a step toward survival. But time was running out. Into this inferno, hundreds of first responders were ascending. Firefighters from the New York City Fire Department, police officers from the NYPD and Port Authority, paramedics, emergency medical technicians. They streamed into the lobbies of both towers, laden with heavy equipment. they began climbing the stairs towards the fire, towards the danger, fully aware of the risks. Their mission was to save lives, to rescue those trapped, to fight the fires. They moved upwards against the flow of evacuees. Each floor climbed was a testament to their bravery, their unwavering commitment to duty. Section 3. The South Tower Falls. An unthinkable reality. The South Tower, though struck second, was the first to succumb. It had been hit lower down than the North Tower between floors 77 and 85. The impact was more direct, more critical to its structural integrity. The fires raged, fueled by jet fuel and office combustibles. Steel, designed to support immense weight, began to soften, to buckle under the intense heat. Engineers would later determine that the connections between the floor trusses and the building's core columns were severely compromised. The building was dying from the inside out, its strength ebbing away. Those on the ground, and those still evacuating, heard ominous sounds. A deep, guttural groaning from the structure. Twisted metal shrieked. Some survivors reported feeling the tower sway or seeing cracks appear in walls. Warnings were shouted. Police officers and firefighters, sensing the imminent danger, urged people to move away, to run. But for many, there was nowhere to go, or no time to react. The building that had seemed so permanent, so indestructible, was about to vanish in a way few could have ever conceived. The laws of physics were inexorable. At 9:59 a.m. Eastern Time, just 56 minutes after being struck, the South Tower of the World Trade Center began to collapse. It started from the impact floors, a pancaking effect. Floor upon floor, 110 stories of steel and concrete gave way. The collapse was terrifyingly swift. In approximately 10 seconds, the entire tower imploded. It fell almost straight down, disintegrating into an enormous cloud of pulverized concrete, dust, and debris. The sight was surreal, unbelievable. A monumental structure, a fixture of the New York skyline, simply ceased to exist. The collapse unleashed a colossal cloud of dust. It billowed outwards, engulfing lower Manhattan. Darkness descended in the middle of the morning. The roar was deafening, like 1,000 freight trains. People on the streets were thrown to the ground. They were enveloped by the thick, choking cloud. Visibility dropped to zero. Rescuers, including many firefighters still in the vicinity or making their way to the North Tower, were caught in the maelstrom. The collapse of one tower dramatically escalated the peril for everyone and intensified the fears for the still-standing North Tower. Section 4. Dust and Silence. The North Tower's End. The North Tower now stood alone, a solitary burning beacon against the sky. It had been struck first, higher up, between floors 93 and 99. It had endured for longer, for 1 hour and 42 minutes. But it too was mortally wounded. The fires inside raged with an uncontrolled fury. Smoke poured from the gash in its side and from its upper windows. For those still trapped inside, the collapse of its twin must have been a terrifying portent. Hope, already so fragile, began to evaporate. The situation was becoming increasingly desperate. On the ground, the scene was one of utter devastation. The collapse of the South Tower had transformed the landscape. It was now an apocalyptic wasteland, covered in inches, even feet of fine gray dust. Emergency responders were disoriented, many were injured, some were lost. Radio communications were severely hampered, yet the rescue efforts continued, focused now on the North Tower and on searching for survivors in the debris field of the South. But the clock was ticking, warnings were issued. The North Tower was also making noises, it was also showing signs of critical weakness. The decision was made to pull back firefighters and rescuers from the immediate vicinity of the North Tower. The risk of a second collapse was too great, but many remained. Some were unaware of the order, others chose to stay, to continue searching, to try and save just one more life. Inside the tower, the remaining occupants faced their final moments. The structure groaned under the immense stress. The fires weakened its core. The damage from the initial impact, combined with the prolonged inferno, was taking its inevitable toll. The end was near. At 10:28 a.m. Eastern Time, the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. Like its twin, it fell rapidly, imploding downwards. A cascade of steel and concrete. Another immense cloud of dust and debris erupted. It surged through the streets of Lower Manhattan, engulfing everything in its path. When the dust began to settle, it revealed a scene of almost unimaginable destruction. Where two of the world's tallest buildings once stood, there was now a mountain of twisted metal and rubble. a gaping wound in the heart of the city. A profound silence, broken only by the wail of distant sirens and the crackle of fires, descended on Ground Zero. The twin giants of commerce were gone. In their place, a vast, smoldering pile of debris. A choking dust, thick as winter snow, blanketed everything. It covered streets, it coated buildings, it clung to the stunned survivors. Silence, an unnatural, heavy silence, descended briefly, broken only by the sharp crackle of unseen fires, and the piercing shriek of alarms from damaged vehicles. Disbelief was etched on every face. The impossible had happened. Twice, the mighty towers had fallen. The familiar skyline was forever changed. First responders who had rushed in with such valor were now caught in this maelstrom. Many did not survive the collapses, but many did. They emerged from the dust cloud like apparitions, covered head to toe in gray powder, disoriented, some injured, yet their duty called. Their instinct to save pushed them forward. They checked on their comrades. They began almost immediately to search, to listen for sounds, for any sign of life amidst the wreckage. Their courage in these first chaotic moments was a beacon. The scale of the destruction at Ground Zero was almost incomprehensible. It was a landscape from a nightmare. Twisted steel beams, some weighing many tons, lay like giant matchsticks. Concrete had been pulverized into fine dust. Fires burned deep within the pile. Unstable sections of remaining structures creaked ominously. The air was thick with toxic fumes. Searching for survivors was a monumental, perilous task. Every step was fraught with danger, but the hope of finding someone alive fueled their desperate efforts. Calls for more help went out. A wave of emergency personnel surged towards Lower Manhattan. Firefighters, police officers, paramedics, construction workers with heavy equipment, volunteers, from across the 5 boroughs, from neighboring states. They came despite the known dangers, despite the unknown horrors that awaited. The realization of the sheer number of people missing began to dawn. Thousands were unaccounted for, each name, a story, each absence, a deepening wound. The rescue operation was only just beginning. Beyond the immediate devastation of Ground Zero, New York City reeled. Bridges and tunnels were sealed. Subways ground to a halt. Airports were closed. Lower Manhattan was isolated, a ghost town covered in dust. Further uptown, the city held its breath. Sirens wailed incessantly. Fighter jets, scrambled too late, patrolled the skies above. An eerie quiet fell over usually bustling avenues. People gathered around televisions in shop windows, or listened to radios, desperate for information, for reassurance that the attacks were over. The emotional impact on New Yorkers was immense. Fear was palpable. The city, a symbol of resilience, felt profoundly vulnerable. Yet amidst the shock, something remarkable happened. Strangers helped strangers. People offered water, comfort, a phone to call loved ones. Lines formed at blood donation centers. There was a shared sense of trauma, but also a burgeoning spirit of unity, a determination not to be broken. The city's heart, though wounded, continued to beat. Its people drew strength from one another. Across the United States, the news spread like wildfire. From coast to coast, Americans watched the horrific images. They saw the towers fall. They saw the smoke rise from the Pentagon. They heard the stories of heroism from Pennsylvania. Work stopped. Schools closed. Families frantically tried to contact relatives and friends in New York and Washington. A collective sense of disbelief turned to anger, and then to a deep, profound grief. The nation was united in its sorrow. Its perceived invincibility shattered. The human cost began to emerge in heartbreaking detail. Makeshift posters appeared on walls, on lampposts, on bulletin boards near hospitals. They showed smiling faces. Have you seen missing? Each flyer a desperate plea, a story cut short. Vigils sprang up spontaneously in parks and public squares. Candles flickered, symbols of remembrance and hope. The raw grief of a nation was laid bare. The names of the lost began to be compiled, a list that would grow tragically long. The weight of so much loss was heavy. The attacks of September 11th were not just seen in America. They were broadcast live across the globe. People in distant lands watched in horror, from London to Tokyo, from Paris to Sydney. News anchors struggled to comprehend, to convey the magnitude of what was unfolding. The images were stark, unforgettable. The sight of passenger planes used as missiles, the collapse of iconic skyscrapers. It was a spectacle of terror that resonated in every corner of the world, a shared moment of global shock. Messages of condolence and condemnation poured in. World leaders expressed their profound sympathy and their outrage. From allies and adversaries alike, offers of assistance and enraged, declared a war on terror. This was not a war against a single nation, but against a diffuse network of extremist groups. Al-Qaeda was the primary target. Its leader, Osama bin Laden, became the world's most wanted man. The world watched, holding its breath, wondering what this new war would mean for everyone. The immediate focus turned to Afghanistan. The Taliban regime there harbored Al-Qaeda. They provided sanctuary. They allowed training camps to operate. An international coalition was swiftly formed. Demands were issued to the Taliban surrender bin Laden, dismantle Al-Qaeda. The Taliban refused. In October 2001, military operations began. The regime was quickly overthrown, but the fight was far from over. The hunt for key Al-Qaeda figures and the struggle to stabilize Afghanistan would stretch on for years, for decades. The long shadow was already falling. The war on terror soon expanded, its scope widened. Controversially, attention shifted towards Iraq. The U.S. administration argued that Saddam Hussein's regime posed a threat. They cited alleged links to terrorism and the supposed possession of weapons of mass destruction. Many allies questioned these justifications. The United Nations did not sanction an invasion. Yet, in March 2003, a U.S.-led coalition invaded Iraq. This decision profoundly divided international opinion. It reshaped alliances. It created new fault lines in the global political landscape. The aftershocks continued to spread. This new era saw significant shifts in international relations. The United States sometimes acted with striking unilateralism, asserting its power on the world stage. Yet, the fight against terrorism also necessitated new forms of cooperation. Intelligence sharing increased between nations. Joint operations were conducted. However, the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq and the broader war on terror also had unintended consequences. They fueled anti-Western sentiment in some regions. They contributed to the rise of new extremist groups. The world became a more complex, a more unpredictable place. The struggle for stability and peace took on new, challenging dimensions. The most immediate and visible legacy of 9/11 was a revolution in security, especially in air travel. Suddenly, airports transformed. They became fortresses. Long lines snaked through terminals. Passengers removed shoes, belts, jackets. Liquids were restricted. Laptops were scanned separately. The Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, was created in the United States. Similar agencies and measures appeared worldwide. Cockpit doors were reinforced, locked from the inside. The simple act of flying would never be the same. It was a stark, daily reminder of the threat. Beyond airports, the architecture of national security underwent a profound change. Governments passed new laws that granted expanded surveillance powers to intelligence agencies. The Patriot Act in the United States became a symbol of this shift. It sparked intense debate. A debate about the balance between security and civil liberties, between privacy and protection. Intelligence budgets swelled. New technologies for monitoring communications were developed and deployed. The state's capacity to watch its own citizens and others grew exponentially. This was a new reality. A constant, unseen vigilance. The very concept of homeland security gained prominence. New government departments were established, like the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Their mission was to protect the nation from within, to secure borders, to safeguard critical infrastructure, power plants, bridges, financial centers. The focus on preventing future attacks became paramount. This often involved a quasi-militarization of domestic security forces, and a greater emphasis on intelligence gathering within national borders. The lines between foreign and domestic threats began to blur. The feeling of being under constant watch grew. These security measures were not confined to one nation. They rippled across the globe. International cooperation on security matters intensified. Passenger name record, PNR data, was shared between countries. Watch lists were synchronized. Protocols for dealing with threats became more standardized, but this enhanced security came at a cost. Not just financial, it impacted the ease of travel, it affected international commerce. It subtly changed the feeling of public spaces. Security checks became common at stadiums, concert halls, even some office buildings. The world felt a little less open, a little more guarded. The attacks of September 11th left deep scars on the collective psyche. In many Western societies, a shadow of suspicion fell upon Muslim communities. Islamophobia, an irrational fear or prejudice against Muslims, saw a disturbing rise. Hate crimes increased. Individuals were targeted based on their appearance or their perceived faith. It became a profound challenge. The challenge to distinguish between a tiny minority of violent extremists and the vast majority of peaceful adherents to Islam. This division created pain. It created misunderstanding. It tested the values of tolerance and inclusion. Media and popular culture grappled with the aftermath. Documentaries, films, books, and art explored the attacks, their causes, their consequences. Some portrayals were nuanced, seeking understanding. Others reinforced stereotypes or fueled existing prejudices. A 9/11th generation came of age. Young people whose formative years were shaped by these events. Their worldview was different, perhaps more cynical, perhaps more aware of global interconnectedness. The search for meaning, for ways to articulate the trauma, and to comprehend the new world it created, became a defining cultural quest. The echoes resonated through every story told. An enduring sense of vulnerability permeated many societies. The feeling that an attack could happen anywhere, anytime. This anxiety became a low hum beneath the surface of daily life. The news cycle, often dominated by reports of terrorism or security threats, reinforced this unease. People learned to live with a heightened awareness of their surroundings. They learned to balance vigilance with the desire to live freely. Maintaining an open democratic society in the face of such fears became an ongoing struggle, a test of resilience, a test of core values. The psychological toll was significant. Yet, alongside the fear came a powerful drive for remembrance and for resilience. Memorials rose from the ashes. The National September 11th Memorial and Museum in New York City became a solemn place of pilgrimage, a place to honor the victims, to learn their stories, to reflect on the events of that day. Around the world, communities found ways to commemorate the anniversaries, to ensure that those lost were never forgotten. The enduring legacy of 9/11s is not just one of tragedy, it is also one of human strength, of compassion, and of an ongoing quest to understand its lessons for the future of humanity. The 11th of September 2001, a date now etched forever in the annals of history. It is a day that stands as a stark dividing line, a day that marked the end of one era and the violent sudden birth of another. The world we knew before that bright, clear morning vanished, replaced by a landscape forever altered by fire, by loss, by an act of terror so profound. Yet, amidst the ashes and the sorrow, the memory of courage endured. The echoes of that day continue to resonate, shaping our present, informing our future. We remember. We must always remember. This is not just a date, but a profound marker in time. The lessons forged in that crucible were many, and they were hard-won. We learned of our vulnerability, yes, that the illusion of perfect safety could be shattered in an instant. But we also learned of our resilience, the profound capacity of the human spirit to endure, to rebuild, to find strength and unity when faced with unimaginable adversity. The events of 9/11 forced a global re-examination of security, of liberty, of the intricate threads that connect us all across this small planet. It taught us that vigilance is necessary, but that the freedoms we cherish must be fiercely protected, even as we strive to safeguard our lives and our communities from harm. Beyond the geopolitical shifts and the heightened security, there lies a deeper truth: the enduring power of the human heart. We saw it in the extraordinary bravery of the first responders, charging into the burning towers, towards danger, not away from it. We heard it in the final, loving words of those aboard the doomed flights, messages of courage and farewell. We witnessed it in the countless acts of compassion, strangers helping strangers, a city, a nation, a world coming together in shared grief and in a shared determination not to be defined by hatred, but by the very best of our humanity. This spirit remains a powerful testament, a light against the encroaching darkness of despair. More than 2 decades have now passed since that fateful Tuesday. The dust has long settled over Ground Zero. New towers rise towards the sky, symbols of defiance and rebirth. Yet the responsibility to remember and to learn remains undiminished. The enduring echo of 9/11 calls us to vigilance, to understanding, to a commitment to build a world where such tragedies are less likely to occur, where differences are bridged not by violence, but by dialogue and mutual respect. The story of that day is one of immense sorrow and profound loss, but it is also, ultimately, a story of enduring hope. A hope that memory can guide us towards a more peaceful, a more just future.